All right, welcome to Ghost Stories Live, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and happy Halloween, a little ahead of time, but for me it's like all week long is Halloween here. So, as I was telling you, this is Pugsley, the Feely Ghost. My niece and nephew know him very well. When they were young, he actually was on, the way I have the ghost on the ceiling fan, they used to actually chase Pugsley around in my parents' kitchen. It was a lot of fun.
We were there when you made him. I helped make him.
Exactly. They named him, right?
Yes.
We did not have a name for him. So anyway, thank you so much for coming. And as I said, we have 3 authors tonight. And at the end of the evening, we're going to open the floor. If anybody wants to tell a true ghost story, you're welcome to. And the 3 authors who are here also have books, so you feel free to buy them afterwards. They can sign them for you. But without further ado, Susan Buffum, are you ready to join us? I don't know what Susan's reading because she's written 3 ghost stories this week. 5 ghost stories this week. So Susan.
This is our first year anniversary of Ghost Stories Live, so I wrote a tribute to the bookstore called the Bookshop.
Yes,
Okay.
project.
And it seemed like the ideal place to open a little indie bookshop. The storefront had 2 large front windows that could easily be decorated with changing displays to entice readers and browsers through the double front door. There were 2 granite steps at the entry with a hand railing for those not so firm of foot. Unfortunately, the store wasn't handicap accessible, but due to its age, it didn't necessarily need to be. Although it could be done if permission was received from the city to build a ramp on its sidewalk. However, it was doubtful that the city would give them that permission because it was in the process of going through a beautification program. And none of the other storefronts on that block were handicap accessible either. The store itself was deep, wide enough for rows of bookshelves down both side walls and another row of books on the left-hand side of the space. There was room near the front windows for additional wall shelves and low bookcases to be added. The right side of the store could be left as it was. They could use that open floor space for tables and chairs when they held events in the shop. They wanted to hold a lot of interesting events that would draw people in. There was a lavatory on the left-rear side of the store, and other spaces that they looked at that only had a facility in the basement, and the majority of those still had the original outdated fixtures, which have been very off-putting. They figured they could liven up the bathroom by using dust jackets as wallpaper or something interesting like that. There was a rear entrance with 1 small step down onto a cobblestone floor. This rear area had most likely been open once, but had been enclosed at some point in time. There was a wrought iron balcony inside this area on the 2nd story to the right as you walked to the exit, which was nice, but rather pointless unless you were Juliet. The walls were rustic barn board, and 1 rough-hewn door opened to reveal a dark staircase descending and turning a sharp right down to a dank, musty basement. There was a door with a window leading out to the back sidewalk and alley area, and beyond that, the municipal parking lot. It was a funky time warp sort of space and made for an interesting rear access point. The sales counter would be at the back of the store with a window behind it looking out into the enclosed rear access space. To the right of the window was an open staircase descending to the basement, which could be used for storage. They really liked the space and signed the lease, writing a big check, and then standing there in the empty store wondering what they had just gotten themselves into. Then they began transforming the empty space with the exposed brick upper walls and wooden lower walls into an almost magical realm of books. They constructed a replica of a big tree in front of the area abutting the bathroom wall. That would be the children's section. They made leaves for the tree from old book pages and wired them to the fake branches. They set a plush owl in the crotch of the tree and arranged white stools with red cushion tops that were dotted with white spots to resemble toadstools around the tree. Bookshelves were brought in to line both side walls. Some metal stools and other small pieces of furniture were added to give customers places to sit while leafing through the pages of books that caught their interest. They knew it was always important to let customers look through the books. Connections between book and reader were made that way. Those connections led to sales, and sales led to profit, which enabled them to pay the rent and utilities and all that business end stuff. Usually one of them worked in the store at a time. Occasionally they were both there, but normally one worked in the store and the other worked their regular job. But on their days off, they would be in the store together, or they would be in the store so the other one could have a day off. Therefore, there was typically only one of them in the store on any given day. Naturally, the store lights were off when the door was unlocked in the morning. Walking through the quiet, darkened store on any given day, one or the other of them would stumble over a book that was lying on the floor. Other times, books were found on the floor closer to the bookshelves. They did stand books on top of the shelves to better display them, so it was conceivable that the books might tumble from their high perch due to the rumble of a tractor-trailer truck passing by on the street out front, or the vibrations of a passing jet headed to or from the nearby airport flying low overhead. It was possible. But sometimes the book was found having fallen forward onto the floor, while a book a little further along the shelf was tilted over backwards, leaning crookedly against the wall. Most of the books are found close to the bookshelves they had been on, but there are times when a book is found face down further away in the open floor space. This was not just a book from a nearby section. It was often a children's book from the rear corner of the shop, or a fiction book that had been located in the aisle on the other side of the freestanding bookshelves, on the bookshelf against the left wall. How the books could have flown across the store and landed in the open space from just the rumble of a truck or the vibration of an airplane passing overhead was more puzzling. However, it had happened. They would just pick up the book and return it to its place and think nothing more of it. At other times, a pen, a bookmark, or another small object was found in a place other than where it should have been. This was shrugged off, attributed to a child or another customer having moved it and then not having noticed it when closing the store the previous evening. Objects couldn't move around on their own, after all. That was rather a ridiculous notion. Sometimes, when one or the other of them was alone in the store, they heard footsteps at the back of the store. When they were at the register sorting the mail, they would occasionally hear what sounded like someone climbing up the stairs from the basement. That was often a little alarming, but they would lean over the half wall and peer down the stairs, always finding that there was no one there. They would shake their heads and go back to whatever they had been doing, passing it off as the noise having come from the little restaurant next door, something on the other side of the shared wall having thumped repeatedly against it, making footstep-like sounds on the stairs. Once, when one of them was alone in the store, they were standing with their back to the window and heard a tapping sound on the glass, as if someone was trying to get their attention. Turning quickly, thinking it was a regular customer just passing by, having had their hair cut or styled at the salon on the other side of the shop, they would find no one there. Occasionally, there was a little smudgy fingerprint on the inside of the glass that was easily wiped away. Well, kids like to run around in the store, so maybe one of them had been looking out into the rear access area out of curiosity and touched the window. They really couldn't watch everyone who came into the store every moment that they were inside. One time, one of them found a doodle on a sticky note. It was very childish in appearance and sort of resembled a flower. The pencil that had been used had rolled onto the floor. She thought he had drawn her a flower before he closed up the shop the previous evening. He denied it when she called him. A few days later, he found a sort of goofy smiling face drawn on the same pad, the pencil again on the floor. He called her and told her she really needed to take art classes if she was serious about sketching. She protested and said that she couldn't draw at all. What on earth was he talking about? They began to save the little drawings underneath the till in the cash register drawer. By the end of the summer, there were about 7 or 8 of them. Neither of them could explain where the drawings had come from or who was responsible, but they had a theory that it was the work of one of their regular customers. Sometimes they ran downstairs to get a box of books to price or to put out. When a customer they were familiar with was in the store, maybe the customers were doodling while they were otherwise occupied, and they weren't noticing the sketches until they were straightening up the chaos on the counter, sometimes not until the following morning. And then they began noticing that display items in the front windows were being moved. Not removed, just turned sideways, or perhaps turned to face into the store rather than toward the sidewalk in the street. A A top hat they often used as a prop was found on the chair at the back of the store one morning. It was one of those rare times when they were both in the store. Turning and looking at one another, they were silent for several long moments before they both said the same thing at the same time. What they said was, "I think we have a ghost." But then came the problem of trying to figure out if that was true or not. How does one go about proving that they really did have a ghost haunting their shop or not? They kicked around ideas, one being that they could ask a paranormal group 2 towns over to stage an investigation in the shop after hours. A lot of the activity seemed to occur after hours. Maybe they could catch a book falling from a shelf because of a heavy vehicle passing by on the street out front. That would debunk the books being found on the floor as being the work of a spirit. Another idea was to set up an infrared camera to cover the center section of the store, maybe mounting it above the doors and recording during the hours the store was closed. He thought they should have another camera at the back of the store too, above the window pointing down at the counter where all the doodling was being done. Maybe they could capture a phantom drawing on the sticky pad. She suggested they buy a digital voice recorder and leave it running atop the half wall to catch any ghostly footsteps climbing up and down the stairs, or the bathroom door creaking open, or maybe even a ghostly voice. Then they looked at one another and shook their heads. If they had a ghost, so be it. It obviously wasn't a mean spirit. It seemed a benign enough, although sometimes mischievous ghost. It wasn't really bothering anything, although a couple of the older book spines had been somewhat damaged when they hit the floor. They just marked books down and taken it as a small loss. The books eventually sold as is, and no one complained about the slight damage or the discounted prices. When a customer was at the counter paying for their purchase, and the rear entrance door slowly creaked open, whichever one of them was at the register would smile at the wide-eyed customer and say, "Our little ghost is just stepping out for a breath of fresh air." Or, "Here comes our little ghost," back in from their stroll outside. And the customer would usually laugh and remark on how nice that was, that there was a ghost in the shop. "We're lucky it's a friendly one," they'd say, and as they smiled back. But was it really a friendly spirit? It seemed to be. Or was it just lulling them into a sense of false security before launching a rain of blood-curdling terror upon them? The realtor who had handled the leasing of the shop had been rather evasive as to why the space had had such a frequent turnover of tenants. She blamed it upon inexperienced people trying to run a first-time business, poor location for the type of business previously located there, a tenant's husband having been relocated across country, requiring her to suddenly close up shop and move away. She had a whole list of reasons why the space had had such a high turnover rate of tenants. They hadn't really thought much about that, and they weren't thinking much about that now as they hosted a ghost storytelling event with seats in the open floor space and a group of local authors ready to tell new and classic ghost stories to the audience that was anxious to be scared by them. But what would happen if a very real ghost passed among the audience members, giving them the chills, or a sensation that they had been touched, or maybe whispering in their ears, playing with their hair, or even causing a book from a nearby shelf to come to the floor? What if the ghost became emboldened by these ghost story events, became increasingly more mischievous and active? What if a terrifying phantom suddenly threw open the rear entry door and rushed into the shop, moaning and shrieking? Wasn't this kind of like playing with a Ouija board? Wasn't this sort of like an open invitation to the spirit to make its presence known? Wasn't it all a little risky? They didn't know. Do you?
Thank you, Susan. You know I have to like open up this shop on my own and stuff, but I do not need that. I have enough problems.
That door creaking open while
I know, exactly. The doors do slam shut a lot, and books do fall off the thing, and I have to say, I always hate being here after dark. But I like to think when I do these things that I'm appeasing the ghosts, like, because I'm giving them some way to express themselves. Like these little guys up here, I think they're really having a great time. So I hope there's like an actual ghost that have inhabited that. I think that's good. I'm going to tell one of the shortest ghost stories I know, and then we're going to introduce my next author. This is called, this is just a climax for a ghost story. How eerie, said the girl, advancing cautiously. What a heavy door. She touched it as she spoke, and it suddenly swung with a click. Good Lord, said the man. I don't believe there's a handle inside. Why, you've locked us both in. Not both of us, only one of us, said the girl. And before his eyes, she passed straight through the door and vanished. It's the shortest ghost story I have. And next we have Melissa Bulker. Now, Melissa, usually fantasy and also straight fiction, but I believe, is this one of your first
This is a ghost
ones?
story.
Is
This
one of your first
You
ones?
made me write one. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, as Russell said, this is not my genre. Even the stuff that's here, if I get kind of creepy, it's never outright paranormal. It would just sort of have an unexpected or unearthly kind of component. So this is, when they ask me to write a ghost story, they tend to come out sort of unconventional. So I'll just leave that out there for you. This is called The Heart of a Home. This is my diary. I'm finally putting it all down because I am old. I will not be around much longer, and I want people to remember that I was here. And I have been here a long, long time. I've been fortunate enough to see many come and go, some of them enjoyable, others not so much. But regardless of that, I have tried to be helpful. I always thought of myself as the one who could help create a sense of home, of welcoming, of belonging. I was always there to open doors, to set the table, to be sure dark rooms were bright and cold nights were warm. My reason for being was to make life easier. My purpose. We all need a purpose, yes? I suppose from the beginning I preferred not to be alone. But don't we all? Even if we say we prefer solitude, it is always only partially true. We all need companionship. We all need to feel adored, appreciated, wanted, useful. When I was young and beautiful, I had plenty of that. Attention came to me with little effort. Like anything sweet and pretty, I just needed to be. And standing there, I was noticed. Anyone I met seemed taken with me immediately. I guess I understand why. I carried an air of presence and solidity, but was also open, welcoming. Like a smile in sunshine, I exuded warmth, laughter, and friendship. Around me, people smiled and laughed easily. And while I often sat quietly, unobtrusively, pretending I wasn't listening, I always heard. And I tremble with happiness as I caught bits of conversation. Oh, it's perfect. Just what we need. Oh, the children would love. Love. To hear that word, I existed to serve. But I also longed to belong. So I worked hard to create an environment of warmth, safety, comfort, fires in the fireplace, relaxing, welcoming music, playful games with children, chasing the dogs, doing the dishes. I didn't mind any of it. I wanted to do it, to make them comfortable. It was my job, yes, but it was more than that. What confused me was how some people didn't seem to want all that attention. They wanted me around, but didn't always seek my help. Sometimes I became an intrusion. Sometimes they wanted me to just be there, quietly. And that's always been difficult for me to understand. Helping is what I do. It's who I am. But sometimes, if I didn't listen to them, didn't leave them to do for themselves, to be alone, if I pushed too hard in an effort to belong, to be loved, they would leave me. All of them, at one point or another, left me. It's difficult to watch so many come and go, especially when you know they loved you deeply, but also when they left angry and resentful. Causing that has never been my intention. I just wanted to be part of it all. I wanted to feel connected, useful, neat. As the years passed, that got harder. As with all things at age, I became a bit bedraggled, a little downtrodden. I tried hard to always look my best, to keep appearances, to stay fit, and able and lovely, because I know that matters. But as years passed, few took any real notice. Well, some did. Those with a real appreciation for what one on in years can offer. Some even preferred what I had to offer. I mean, I've seen things, I've lived, I have character, experience. They would even go out of their way to make me feel special, accepted, and in return, I'd go the extra mile. Even as I aged, I'd work to prove my usefulness. I'd clean and put away the dishes. I'd spend extra time with pets and children. If I sensed people were sad, which I've always been very good at, by the way, I'd try and cheer them up, having music on when they came home or drawing a warm, comfortable bath at the end of the day. It was harder, though, to do those things as I got older, but I didn't want anyone to think I'd outlived my usefulness. I still had value. I could still have purpose. Age doesn't steal that, but it does tend to steal your visibility. People look past you to something fresher, younger. I don't want to be forgotten. That seems to happen with age, and it's depressing. It's maddening. It's terrifying to be forgotten. Why did I exist at all then? Now, they say I'm a danger and cannot be trusted. I've let myself go because I don't have the energy to keep myself beautiful and strong. Everything around me is wilting, and I seem to be following suit. I forget myself sometimes and fly into a rage. I don't want to hurt anyone, but no one seems to understand. I need to make them understand. They think I don't hear them talking about me, but I do. About how it's time, that I cannot be left here on my own anymore, and there's nothing to be done to help me. I yell and scream and smash things about, trying to get them to hear me, to see me. No one will look at me. They don't want to be reminded of the passage of time. To see me is to see their own lives racing by toward their inevitable end. But that's not fair. That's not my fault. Maybe broken windows and smashed glassware or banging doors will get them to hear me, to really see me as I used to be, and as I believe I could be again with just a little help. Just like I used to provide for them all those years. All those lights lit before dark, the music playing, the fires lit and crackling, warm when it grew cold outside. Don't I deserve the same now, after all I've given? But they don't know. I think they've just stopped listening because I'm old and tattered and tired, and what I say doesn't matter anymore. I am irrelevant. Stay away, avoid me, tell others to do the same. So I am alone. I sit, watching the world pass me by, the sunrises and the sunsets, the children laughing and running through the fields, the snow, the rain, the wildflowers grown and then gone. I watch it all, alone. They have abandoned me, and I am nothing. So I write my diary, and I leave it for everyone to see in bold, brash letters. I leave it on my own skin, my own flesh. I engrave it there in deep, angry gashes, because to leave it anywhere else means it will get lost, because that's what happens to things that just get left around. They get lost, forgotten. So I've scrawled it, scratched it, carved it on myself before their very eyes. I've done it while they were here, the men, so they would be sure to see, so someone would be sure to know. I carved it while they stood there. I was here. I was beautiful. I was useful, I loved you, and I loved the world, and you once loved me. I wish you could remember. I just want someone to remember that I was here. I write it now because I'm out of time, because the paper has been plastered to my eyes and my heart, the paper with bold red letters, condemned, keep out, scheduled for demolition. And the trucks are coming, their hum vibrating across the ground. But I was here once. I lived. I watched families come and go, children grow and leave. I welcomed them all, and though I frightened some away, that was never my intention. I wanted to help me go home. I wanted to be loved. I was here, but now I am old, abandoned, and the trucks have come.
Melissa, thank you. How's the show so far, York? It was great. Great progress. Thanks. Our next reader is Kelly Buffin, and Kelly works in East Windsor at the Trolley Museum. So I believe she will have a lot of insight when she tells her story, Ghost Train.
No matter what I do, a lot of my play stories end up being about railroading. I don't know. He took away the one that I was going to read, which isn't this one.
Sorry.
So, slow down, Abby called as Alan Braid's thin form wound through the trees ahead of her, his long black coat flapping around him as he spun back towards her. Hurry up, he countered, a mischievous smile flitting across his face. I thought you wanted to film today. We're wasting daylight. Despite his protest, he slowed, allowing her to catch up. How much further? Not far now. She forced herself not to pat the pocket of her sweatshirt to verify the presence of the canister of pepper spray her mother had given her. Before today, she had never spoken to Alan, but when she put out the request for help making a documentary on the dangers of taking selfies on railroad tracks, he'd been the only one to respond. He said he knew the perfect place to shoot the film. Having little other choice, she'd taken him up on his offer. Now she was hoping he wasn't taking her out into the woods to murder her. Here, Alan's voice snapped her thoughts back into focus. Ahead, a set of railroad tracks cut through the trees. How'd you find this place? She asked, stepping towards the tracks, her feet rustling through the thick layer of leaves covering the ground. I walk a lot. He left off the part where he only did that because he was an outcast who didn't have friends to spend time with. Do trains run through here? The tracks seemed dull, the railbed full of leaves. Not anymore. This line's been exempt for decades. He stepped past her to stand between the rails. You brought your camera, right? Of course I did. Then don't you think you should get it out? What am I supposed to film? The empty tracks? You'll see. She was about to protest when he continued. Hurry up, it's almost 4 o'clock. What's so important about 4 o'clock? She asked, reluctantly removing her prized video camera from her backpack. Alan crouched down, fingertips touching the rusty rail between them. A slow smile spread across his face. Take a few steps back, then you better start filming. Filming what? You'll see. Alan, he ignored her, so she stepped back and aimed the camera at him, pressing the record button. Train's coming, he murmured, rising to his feet and spreading his arms as he turned to look down the track to her right. Right on time. To Abby's horror, the distant rumble of a locomotive began to reach her ears through the otherwise quiet woods. I thought you said this track's exempt. It is, but there's a train! She could now hear the wheels squealing on the rusty rails. Alan, get off the track! Don't worry, Abby. It'll be fine. Just keep filming. Al! His name cut off in a scream as, before she could jump forward and pull him to safety, the train arrived with a mournful howl. Alan tipped back, the wind catching his coat, swaying it behind him and sending leaves circling around them as he laughed. The train passed through, a silvery gray blur in the fading light. Only after it was gone did Alan lower his arms, turning to face the camera. And that is why you don't trespass on railroad tracks.
Thanks so much, guys. So now, the typical thing we do for Ghost Stories Live is we do news stories, classic stories, and then we open the floor for anybody who wants to share a true ghost story. So I'm going to do the classic story tonight. And I've always wanted to read A Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, so I'm going to get my chance and we'll see if I totally freak out here. Let's see what I do. I'm going to take my glasses off. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease that had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and otherwise how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his goal I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, and with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it so slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible for me to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than mine did. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly and as if startled. Now you may think I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, with a thick darkness, and for the shutters were closed, fastened, though, for fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet, quite still, and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it was welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since that first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been rising ever since, growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, But he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow upon him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how steadily, how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot out of the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinction, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when it is enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I'm nervous, so I am. And now, at that dead hour of night, amid the dreaded full silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yes, for some minutes longer I refrained and stood, but the beating grew louder and louder. I thought my heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. The old man's hour had come. He shrieked once only. In an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him, and then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart, held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think I'm mad, you will think so no longer. When I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body, the night waned and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took off 3 planks from the floor of the chamber and deposited all between the scantings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputated to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest upon their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat. While I answered them cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. Ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew more pale. I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations. The noise grew steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if to excite the fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon the floor. I had been sitting and I grated upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder, and still the men chanted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Oh my God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought and this I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again, hark, louder, louder, louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more, I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here is the beating of his hideous heart. So this is part of the evening where we welcome people if they have ghost stories. And I know we have a few people who do actually have ghost stories. If anybody wants to tell a ghost story, you are most welcome to. Anybody want to start one off?
Austin, do you think we really have a ghost in the bookshop?
I do think we
Other
have a
than
ghost
Bugs
story, I
Lane?
have to say, yes. So yeah, maybe I will start by saying that I'm pretty sure we have a ghost in the workshop. Because yes, as I do come in, as Susan's story did say, we always find books toppled over, knocked over. Sometimes, yes, a truck may have knocked them over, but it's always a book that then hits like 3 other books. So then when I come in, there's like 4 books stretched across the floor. So I understand just like 1 book falling over. And then when I was preparing for Halloween this year, I would come in after work, like around 11 o'clock at night to try to work on my scarecrow or my ghost. And it was I did not like it. Because I would go down to the basement then, just as Susan said.
My stories were all basement based, yeah.
Yes, right. You're in the basement. And one of the things we do when we're down in the basement, we can always hear when somebody comes in because you can hear their feet across the thing. So you're like, oh, I've got to go upstairs and check the customers.
It's sometimes no one's there.
And then you come up and you're like, hi, I can help you. And it's like you're talking to FBI. There is nobody here in the bookshop. There's not a lot of Westfield. People do have ghost stories in Westfield, but I find that they don't tell them because they want to keep them in. And I have a theory too that Westfield tears down their haunted houses. They know places are haunted. I have a theory that the McDonald's they are rebuilding is haunted, and that's one of the reasons they tore that down to rebuild it. Yeah, Westfield is wiser than like a lot of the places you read about in stories and stuff. Anybody else have a ghost story? Michael, yes. Yes, we have a ghost story. Please stand up. You can even come forward if you like. If you're up. Yeah. If you're brave enough.
This was one of my first jobs.
Please step forward. We'd love to hear. Is it a local thing or is it something that happened?
No,
I
it's
started
something
in
that happened.
January until May.
It's more of a, yeah, I would say it's a ghost story. It happened 14 years ago. I was living in Salem, and I worked for a movie theater, and I was just getting off of work, and I was on my way home. I get off the bus, and of course, naturally, it was raining, and it was actually pouring, and when it was thundering, and it felt like gunshots, because in Salem, you hear that a lot in that area. So I'm going up to my apartment. I'm walking up the stairs, and you can hear the building's very old, so the stairs creak, and all the lights were out in the hallway. So I was pretty scared. As I was walking up, I could hear pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, and I looked behind me, and there was nothing there. I had my phone on me, I put the flashlight on, there was nothing there, so I kept going up. So I finally get to my apartment, I walked in, and I was still in my uniform. And my roommate says, she just looked at me and said, you act like you've seen a ghost. And I told her to shut up. I was tired. I was like, I'm going to bed. I was like, I don't have time for this. I was like, I'll deal with it when the time comes. So I veered off to her. My room was, I actually took where my room was. It was like her room was on the left hand side. I sometimes